This is video number 4 of qualitative research. We are looking at, what are we looking at? The 6 stages of field observation techniques. We're starting on number 2, which is gaining access. You can see behind me the beautiful San Diego aquarium, and not many people here. A beautiful area. I have spent no expense in going to many places and traveling to get the best backgrounds for my Com 400 class. Okay, we're looking at gaining access now. Some settings are open to the public, and you don't have any trouble getting there. Going to the park, for instance. If I went to Washington Park outside there, Washington Park way over on the other side of in the Midwest. Of course, I'm in San Diego right now, but if I were to go to a park like Washington or another park, it would be easy to go there. Not difficult at all. Some other places there's difficulty in getting in there. For instance, if you wanted to do research on a prison population, it'd be very difficult to get in there. If you want to do research maybe on people in a high-rise exclusive resort, it might be hard because of security and other problems. Getting permission would be difficult. So gaining access is important. There was one study that was done that was an amazing study a number of years ago by a woman named Gay Tuckman that really changed how we look at news and information gathering. It was called Making News, and she went into newsrooms and just observed where they got their news, how they processed it. She looked at their schedules. She came up with a thing and said there's a news net which reporters use, and if you're not in a place where the news net goes, your news isn't going to be known. And so that was a very good study. She got permission from those newsrooms, though, to study them, and gaining access is very important. Another aspect is sampling. And you think, with qualitative research, there can't be sampling. And that's partly right. However, you do select people. So while, one, there are no rigid guidelines, two, the subject under study and situation determine the sampling, and three, sampling guidelines should be made for individual studies. In other words, it's not really sampling, but you should show how you selected people and write that down for each study. It's going to be a little bit different, but you want to show you didn't just go out and select specific individuals that might not reveal as much as you thought. One example could be a study might examine people in a particular homeless shelter with their permission. You could observe a behavior in a McDonald's restaurant playground. When my son was small, I found there was quite a lot of interesting dynamics with young people, and some were being watched by their parents and some not so much. And that interaction is very interesting. But that could be an example. You could do a study on customer upselling. And of course, you would have to describe how you chose individual places to do each of those things. The fourth aspect is collecting data. And this is aspects of field research. Collecting data is the fourth aspect. Pen and paper are still used. You still might jot down notes. If you had a digital computer that has the handwriting capability on it, and actually those have been around for a long time, but recently they've gotten more popular and easier to use with the Surface Pro, and now other computer companies are doing it as well. But you may want to, that might be something you would do. Pen and paper still is used. Digital communication is also used as well, recording, and there can be some problems with recording, however. So let's take a minute and look at some problems specifically with recording. One is it takes time away from the researching to set it up. So if you go and you're going to talk to somebody, you have to set that up, and it can be distracting. The second thing, it has a limited frame if you're taking a video. The human eye sees about 120 degrees, very wide. A camera only sees about a 60-degree area, so you miss a lot, much more than you're going to miss much more than the eye can see. Another aspect is transcriptions, and transcriptions must be made. If you've ever used some of the software that some companies use, you know that is far from helpful. Sometimes, if you're dealing with dialects and other things, it's very difficult to hear and understand that. I once had an experiment, and the people were from, it was after Hurricane Katrina, and the people were from the Ninth Ward, and some of them had very thick accents. Also, some of them referred to places in the area that had French names, and so even though we had a human person who was transcribing it, that person had great difficulty in understanding what that was, more so if you're using artificial intelligence to try to get that. So transcriptions can actually be a problem. They take a long time to get, and the quality of those transcriptions is very important. Because of the narrow field, or if you're just listening to things, behavior can be taken out of context. Somebody might be distracted and look away at something, and if you are there, you could realize maybe a squirrel went by, or somebody came into the room. It might look like the person is bored to somebody else who is just analyzing it. So that can be a problem. It also tends to be distracting. My wife was going to interview somebody who, two women actually, who were going to talk about their mother's work on the farm and how she made do with feed sacks to make dresses. And that was what my wife's dissertation was on. She's a professor in fashion and design. So she actually talked to them, but it took a long time for them to be comfortable and say, okay, you can actually record us. And she did that. Incidentally, these people became very proud of the research that was done. An exhibit was put on that basically highlighted what her mother had done and the fashions that her mother had created from just feed sacks on the farm. And they were so proud when it actually did come in. But initially, people often don't want to hear themselves, or they're afraid they'll sound silly because they've heard themselves on recordings. So that can be a distraction. Number 5 is analyzing data. And in analyzing data, categories need to be constructed. The categories might be things like if you're watching a group, you might have categories such as relationships. You can also have subcategories, might be kinds of relationships, and once you've gotten those categories and put everything in, some of the information that's not helpful can be dropped out of the study, other things can be ignored, and you can work with the information categories that you have. Finally, on the areas of phases of a field studies, number 6 is exiting. And this is very interesting because you must have a plan for exiting the group. You don't want to harm the group by all of a sudden disappearing because they may feel like they've been used, that that you didn't really care about them, and that you were just doing it for the study. So you may have developed friendships during that time. So you should try not to hurt participants psychologically when you leave. Now, we're going to take a look now at kinds of qualitative, the second kind of qualitative research. We looked at field studies. Next, we're going to look at focus groups. We're going to do that on the next video.